Astro just got even better with the release of version 5. If you don't know already, Astro is one of the best ways to build content-driven sites like your blogs, marketing sites, and so much more. This update makes it even better. So let's find out the 5 best new features that were added, and be sure to subscribe if you like development tips, news, tutorials, and so much more. Starting out with the killer feature of Astro 5 then, that is the content layer. The content layer is a flexible, pluggable way to manage content, whether from a CMS, API, Markdown, JSON, and loads more. It provides a unified, type-safe API to define, load, and access this content in your project, no matter where it comes from. If you're like me and you have a Markdown blog all hosted in GitHub, you may have realized that this begins to be less practical as your site grows. This is when you then might reach for a CMS, an image provider, and have some features backed by an API. This would have been a mess to manage previously with a load of different APIs and data fetching methods. Now, it's super easy. You can use built-in loaders to load your local files. You can really easily make your own loaders to fetch data from any custom API, or you can use community-built ones to fetch data from a CMS like Storyblock, Cloudinary, or HighGraph. You can transform data from any source into a content collection. Then, when you build your site, Astro loads the data from all of these sources and caches the collections in a single, type-safe data store that you can then use in your pages. On top of all of this, content collections now build up to 5 times faster for Markdown pages and up to 2 times faster for MDX, while memory use is cut by 25 to 50%. All of this while being backwards compatible, which is super cool to see. Now let's talk about another awesome feature, server islands. Astro helped popularize the island architecture for the client and is now doing the same for the server. Server islands allow you to combine your static HTML with dynamic server generated components on the same page. So say we had an e-commerce site, we would have the product name and description as static content that basically never changes, then the current price and available styles that might change infrequently, and finally a user's shopping cart, which is obviously going to be unique per each user. Previously, in Astro, you would have had to choose a caching strategy for all of these, usually meaning no caching at all when there was user-based data. Server Islands solve this though. With Server Islands, you can cache the static content and the infrequently changing database content at the edge for extremely fast loading, while only dynamically loading the personalized elements for each user. This means that every visitor will get an instant initial page load while still seeing their personal shopping cart, recommendations, and other customized content as it loads in. This means, for example, if you had a slower island, maybe from a slow API, it's not going to delay the rest of the personalized content from being rendered either. You can even set a custom fallback component to show as it's loaded in. I'm super excited to use these as I think it takes Astro to a whole new level. The next update to Astro is actually just a simplification of existing features, massively improving the developer experience. Astro will now dynamically switch its output mode, allowing you to use features that require server-side rendering without figuring out which configuration option you need. This is a simplification from previous versions where you had to use static if you just wanted HTML files, server for pages rendered at runtime, and then when islands came about, we had hybrid to mix them both together. The team realized people were asking things like about the settings they would need to use specific features, or they just ended up using server rendering more than needed as it was way easier to configure. In Astro 5 though, they've merged the hybrid and static option. Now the static mode will allow you to render individual routes at runtime on the server just by adding in an adapter. No other configuration is required. It's still all static by default, but if you turn off pre-rendering for a page, Astro will dynamically switch its output, allowing you to use server-side rendering without figuring out which configuration option you need. Another awesome developer experience feature is Astro 𝗵𝗽𝗶. This is a new module that gives you a type-safe way to use environment variables in your apps and configure exactly where that variable should be allowed, whether it's the client or the server. This is something that's been getting more and more confusing with server rendering. Astro 𝗵𝗽𝗶 lets you configure whether your variables are to be used in the client or server, designate variables as secrets that you don't want to be exposed in the client nor in the server build, and even specify whether a variable is required or optional, and even the type of the variable such as string, number, boolean, or enum. This just prevents the need to cast it in your application, and it can help you catch any misconfigured environment variables early with a more useful message about what's going wrong. The syntax is quite cool too. Once it's set up, all you have to do is import the environment variable where you want to use it. Now let's look at some cool experimental features added in this update as well, all centered around images in Astro. They've added image cropping support when using the default Sharp image service. Using the new fit and position props, you can now create images that perfectly match that container, so you're not sending any more data than needed, so you can help improve those load times. Images also got better with responsive image layouts, which will allow you to automatically generate image source sets and sizes to ensure that your images look good on all devices and load as fast as possible. They've also improved using SVGs in Astro as well. Now you can import .svg files and use them like any other component. You can pass in any prop that the native SVG element can handle, like height, width, fill, and stroke. That's all of my favorite features covered, but there's even more like 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗁 support and a load more bug fixes and improvements. I'll leave a link to that release blog post in the description down below. Let me know in the comments below if you like Astro and these new changes, and as always, see you in the next one.